I'm recording now? Are you serious? All right, so Ayesha. I feel like I sang this song to you, passing me by the first time I met you, and you were like, not. I remember like sitting in ICU and you were just staring at me as I was doing the passing me by, and you were like, and then I realized that like that's probably not the first time that's ever happened to you. Was it?
Never. No.
No. Okay.
No.
So actually,
Since childhood,
that little boy, that little white boy that made that video, Ayesha, he's Canadian. Fun fact. Yeah, I'm also Canadian.
Look at that.
I apologize.
It's okay.
So, welcome to For the Caregiver. I'm Julianne. This is Ayesha.
Hey.
We worked together all throughout the pandemic in ICU. Last year, I guess not all throughout the pandemic because it's still happening.
Still going.
And we don't work together that much anymore. But in the thick of it last year, March, April, May, June, July, we were together.
Tag teaming.
In ICU.
Definitely in ICU.
So, thank you for coming.
You're welcome. I'm very honored.
Oh, thanks. What we're going to talk about today is whatever we want, because this is my podcast. So, just kidding. Travel nursing. So, Ayesha has since gone on to travel nursing. How many hospitals have you been in?
So far, I'm about to finish my second hospital, my second contract, but I've almost been doing travel nursing for about a year.
Okay.
So October will be a year.
What is the most challenging part of travel nursing?
I would say just relearning everything, and then also learning who the doctors are, learning what they dislike, learning the unit, that part of things. But honestly, after I would say the first 2 weeks, you kind of get used to it, how the unit is run, and then you kind of snap in just like that. Yeah,
I guess when you're works in one location for a long time, you know your coworkers, you know your physicians, you know how so-and-so likes what or whatever. But that would be challenging. You have to be really adaptable.
Very.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So, recently, 2-3 days ago, you want to scoot in a little bit?
You're like,
2-3 days ago, the New York Times put out an article called Nursing is in Crisis. Staff shortages put patients at risk, with a quote that said, when hospitals are understaffed, people die. It's true. When hospitals are understaffed, people do die. We've been talking about this. I have mixed feelings about this article, as I know you do as well. And one of the things that the article really kind of highlighted was, what was the word they used? Poaching from travel agencies, poaching nurses away from the bedside into travel agencies because they're willing to pay. How do you feel about that?
I feel like for so long, us nurses have been stretched thin. And we have been working for, in my own words, minimum pay. And I can just speak from experience of before doing travel nursing, I was working paycheck to paycheck. And it was upsetting because all I could think of is I'm a single parent. I went to school, got this degree. I'm not nothing against new grads, but I'm not a fresh student or, coming off, but yet I'm still barely making ends meet.
Right.
And then I see this travel nurse at the bedside with me doing the same amount of work, doing the same job that I'm doing, and yet getting paid 2-3 times more than I'm getting paid.
Right.
And that's how I even got into travel nursing, because I feel like they're getting paid what they should get paid, what nurses should be getting paid for the amount of stuff that we deal with and the amount of work that we do.
Right. And again, just the amount of work that we do, the amount of liability that we assume.
Yes.
we're, they talk about, and I don't know if all my nursing orientations I've ever been to talk about the Swiss cheese effect. So like the holes in the cheese and where, basically like where a mistake could actually get to the patient. And a mistake, like the last hole, the last line of defense in a mistake getting to a patient is us. Is us. And so, if the doctor or someone orders Plavix, this is a real life situation. This patient had multiple physicians on their caseload. And what was ordered for this patient was Plavix, Eliquis, heparin, Lovenox, and aspirin. Okay? Wow. I'm like, should I call a physician before we kill a man? Or,
yeah,
but consider maybe a new grad not understanding what those 5 medications are or how they would work together or whatever. But had I given those, it would have been on me. It would have been, why didn't you question why there was 5 anticoagulants on a patient's chart? And so I think it's not even just how much work we do, which is a lot. It is a lot of work. And it's not even just the liability we assume. It's also the tragedies that we witness. It's also the loss that we witness. And all of those things have been exacerbated by the pandemic, but all of these things have been a component in nursing since forever.
Yeah.
Since forever.
And we're also literally dealing with people's lives. We're not at the grocery store. We're not out doing lawn work. We're actually touching these people. We're actually physically caring for these people. And like you said, with the Swiss cheese effect, it does end with us. And if we don't have that questioning mindset, even after being exhausted from doing 3, 4, 12-hour shifts in a row, if you don't have that questioning mindset, that could mean between life and death with a person.
Right. For that person who is someone's whole entire world. It's amazing. Let's get to, what did they say? What were we looking at earlier? One of the things the New York Times said, so she said that hospital leaders across much of this area that this article is talking about have been struggling to stanch the loss of nurses over the past year. Burnout and poaching by financially flush health systems have hobbled hospitals during the worst pandemic health crisis in living memory. I take issue with this because burnout and poaching by financially flush health systems have hobbled hospitals. And I can't speak for the organization that this article is talking about, but I can speak for my organization. Last year, in 2020, the organization that I work for, our CEO made a $3 million bonus.
Wow.
And so when you talk about not having enough money to keep your loyal staff that live in your community, that live locally in proximity to your hospital, that oftentimes have been at your hospital for years, have been loyal for years, and you talk about how you're willing to pay a travel agency. The reason these travel agencies are financially flush, by the way, is because hospital administration systems are willing to pay those travel agencies what those travel agencies are promising those nurses. So it all goes back to healthcare as a system. And so to say that you'd be willing to pay a travel nurse for a 6-week contract, triple the amount that you'd be willing to offer to your loyal staff who have been a part of your organization for decades, something doesn't add up to me. Something isn't. So if you're in a place where you need more people to come in, or you need your staff to work overtime, why not offer them what you would offer a traveler?
Exactly. And I think that's the key point that people who have written this article is missing out.
Yeah.
When I talk to my recruiter, she tells me this hospital is willing to give you this amount. So it's not the agency itself. It's the hospital who's paying me.
That's interesting.
And then, of course, the agency may get a cut, but still, it's the hospital that's paying me. So when I look at that, and then I look at the loyal staff that has been there, the loyal staff who is willing to probably work more if you were to give them more, but then they see somebody like me now who comes in and is getting paid double, that doesn't really encourage that loyalty anymore.
Right. It doesn't. It kind of makes me mad. Like, I'm glad you're here to help, but holy smokes, like, I'm making $43 an hour maybe, and you're making $143 an hour. You know what I'm saying? Like, literally. And so, also, I think travelers can bring amazing. I think that thing that's cool about travelers, especially in a pandemic, you can come from one hospital to another and say, hey, where I came from, this is what was working and what wasn't working, or this is what we tried here. And so you can bring in a degree of expertise that is more expansive. But I think also one of the challenges is they don't have that loyalty. Like, I'm here to get my shift done and get out. And oftentimes you're like showing them where stuff is, and you're like, here's the supply room. And because that stuff takes time to like learn. Like, even with me, I'm in float pool, and sometimes from one unit to another, I'm like, where are their ambu bags? Like, where are their extra, like, really fundamental supplies? So in that sense, like, why wouldn't you pay? Like, why wouldn't you want your own staff? Like, why wouldn't you want your teams that are used to working together, that know each other, that know how to function together, that know when I get in a code room with a certain group of people, I already know who's doing what. Right.
Yeah. Because it is also learning this new culture. Yeah. And like coming in and you don't know anybody, that is the downside of being a traveler, because you're having to learn, okay, who does what and who's okay with what. And then how does this culture function? Because I'm in this culture for a bare minimum of time. Basically, on my first day of orientation, I'm like, how can I survive here? And then I just need to survive for 6 weeks, and then I'm out into the next culture, and I do the same thing all over again. Right. But if they could keep their nurses and keep their that's how you create loyalty in the first place. When you feel like you are secure in a place, when you feel that you're valued in a place, that's how you stay there. Yeah. That's how you keep your people. But once you don't feel that way anymore, that's when you lose the people.
Right. The article called us workhorses. The workhorses that bear the load of a well-oiled machine. In one sense, I read it, I'm like, it's true, but it shouldn't be. Like, we are worked like horses. We often don't get breaks. We're often not getting our lunches. We're often, they come for you if you clock in 3 minutes late, but nobody cares if you didn't get a lunch. But don't clock out that you didn't get a lunch, because a lunch could have been offered to you. It's like a lot about saving face, I feel like, with healthcare industry. It's not really about patients. It's about looking like we care about patients. And I just think that the pandemic has highlighted really the disingenuousness, especially to us, to the healthcare workers. Like, we always kind of knew, like, this shit is a little bit off. Right. Like, this is kind of like not okay. Like, we always kind of knew that. And now it's like on full display. Like, I got COVID from my hospital. I took my own PTO to cover my mandatory time off so that I don't pass COVID to other people. And my CEO got a $3 million bonus, because we just can't afford to do that for our employees. And so it's highlighted to us the disingenuousness of healthcare as a business model and healthcare as a system. And I'm just like, what do we do? What do we do? Because when you take your own personal life into the picture, you do something like travel nursing. You do something like, screw this, like, I'm out. But what do we do overall for healthcare? Because at the same time, like, being a nurse is all I've ever wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the biggest honors of my life. And it's being destroyed by a healthcare system. So what do we do?
And that's the hard question to ask. I mean, not ask, but to answer.
Yeah.
It's like, because I feel the same way. Like, I've known since literally I was a little kid that I wanted to be a nurse. Mm-hmm. And especially being an ICU nurse, I feel very honored because I deal with the sick of the sick. Mm-hmm. And sometimes just even being that hand to hold to a dying mm-hmm. patient, it means something to me. And to be being taken advantage of, and kind of like what you were saying before of how it just seems like it became part of the culture where in nursing school, you learned that being a nurse is such an honor. Mm-hmm. But then when you get to the real world, mm-hmm. you're being oriented by people and you think, man, these nurses
crusty. Why is she so crusty?
So Scrooges, and they're mean, and they're this and that, and all I want to do is care for people.
Right.
But then you continue to be in this culture, and it slowly wears you down. Mm-hmm. Because it's like how you see something being right or wrong, and you clearly see it's being mm-hmm. right or wrong, and this isn't right. Like, why is anybody saying anything? But because nurses have been so used to being mistreated and not getting these lunch breaks, or
to the point where we mistreat each other almost, to the point where it's like your coworker's like, I'm so hungry, I didn't get a lunch today, and you're like, suck it up and join the club. Like, and nobody's getting a lunch. Who do you think you are? Like, and in that thought process, I realized, like, I am so conditioned to suffer that mm-hmm. it is now my expectation for someone else. Mm-hmm. Like,
you're getting a morning break? What do you mean you're getting a morning break?
Oh,
I still haven't had my coffee.
The breakfast breaks?
Yes. I need my sugars.
When the attendants are like, can I have my breakfast break? I'm like, a what?
What? Girl, you better wait for lunch.
Can you have your what? You know the deal. We get 30 minutes and 12 hours, if that. Like,
exactly.
Sit down and be quiet. But it's insane. 30 minutes and 12 hours? Mm-hmm. That means for 11 and a half hours, I am thinking critically. Mm. I am not even forget the physical, don't forget it, but like in addition to the physical of standing, walking, moving, lifting, for 12 hours, I am processing emotions. I am making critical decisions that could be life-changing. Mm-hmm. That could be life-changing. Like, I right now have a friend who just got out of ICU. He has COVID. He's 35 years old. He's got 2 kids and he has COVID. He just got out of ICU, off the ventilator. Mm. Huge win, right? But his kidneys are failing. So he's in the step-down unit. And I was already a little bit nervous. Because, you go from those ratios. Mm-hmm. He's out of ICU. So now it's safe for him to have a nurse that has 5 other patients or 4 other patients. I don't know what their hospital ratios are. But I was nervous. And he went into cardiac arrest last night. And they got his heart beating again. But it's because he didn't get dialysis in time. So his K was through the roof. Wow. And I'm just going like, this is the ripple effect of short staffing. Because all he needed was dialysis to make sure that his potassium levels stayed within normal parameters. Then he got super tachycardic and then he went into cardiac arrest. Because he needed dialysis. And I'm just going like,
something that definitely
he's now back in ICU on a ventilator for the second time after already winning. He won. Like, he got off the vent having COVID. He's been 23 days on a vent and he got off the vent and now he's back on the vent because he went into cardiac arrest because who knows? I don't know. I don't know the situation. I don't know if they didn't have enough dialysis nurses. I don't know if there was a line for dialysis. I don't know. But like, that's literally all he needed was to just have dialysis. And so I'm going like, I see its effects And yet, if I'm the dialysis nurse, I'm not staying there. Are we about saving lives or not? Like, I don't know. It just bugs me.
And then in what order? It's like, are you patient number 5? I know that you're going down
7.9, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really tough. The other thing that we were talking about before is there isn't actually a shortage of nurses. In the year 2020, there's 4 million nurses in the United States. There's 4 million registered nurses in the United States. What there is a shortage of, and becoming an increasing shortage of, is nurses that are willing to work in the hospital acute care setting at the bedside in these conditions. And that was decreasing steadily since 2016, and decreasing, of course, even more so since last year. So the headlines are always, oh, nursing crisis, nursing shortage, nursing this, nursing that. There isn't a shortage of actual nurses. There's a shortage of actual nurses who are willing to work those conditions. And that's increasing.
I believe that. Because if you just look at the stuff, again, that we deal with, you know, like us nurses, like that article had mentioned, we are the horse's bag? We're
the workhorse of the hospital, guys. I just love it. Like thank you. I always wanted my butt to look like that, you know? I'd be squatting to have a booty like a workhorse, you know? Like, I really do, but jeez Louise, like...
I just can't get, like...
I just want to get to some of the funny stuff we were in before, because, like... What were you going to say about that, though?
But we are the flow of the hospital.
True.
We are the nutritionist sometimes. We are the respiratory therapist. I can definitely speak when pandemic first hit.
We were RT all over the world.
We were RT. The doctors were looking at me through the window telling me what to do.
Yep.
The respiratory was doing the same thing. I was in there suctioning them.
Come on.
Changing ventilator settings.
Come on. I'm looking for something.
I've been the nutritionist. I've been the respiratory therapist. Sometimes I've been even the pharmacist.
Right.
So we carry a lot of hats.
There's not going to be pharmacy tonight, so you're going to need to mix your own meds. I'm there with my calculator, like 3 computers and Google, and I'm like, really hope I'm dosing this out correctly. And then you like grab another nurse who doesn't have the time for your bullshit. And you're like, but seriously, like, so the patient weighs 86 kilos. And now I need to like...
Yeah.
Like... It's just AFib RVR. They're tacking away in there, but I gotta like figure out my cardizem drip. Sorry. Yeah. Like,
what and hopefully happening? I do the pump right to make sure he's getting the amount of bolus.
Now I'm all the layers of the Swiss cheese. Like I have nobody else to blame except for me if this shit goes wrong, and I'm like making $40 an hour or less, or less.
Yes.
Who's responsible for this if, like, I'm not 100% awake, alert, on my game? You know, like, me.
It's your fault. You should have asked for help. You should have drunk more coffee.
From who?
You should have done all this stuff. There's always a you should have done this.
And, you know, it's just like in the administrator's office, this is just a teachable moment for you. What if the patient died? It's not just a teachable moment for them. It's not just a teachable moment for me. Like, who's accountable for this situation? Besides just me. Because that's crazy. Okay, so Delta variant pummels the United States. Bedside nurses, the workhorse of a well-oiled hospital, are depleted and traumatized.
I agree about that part.
Yes. It's true. This article was difficult for me because there's so many aspects in it that are true. Mm-hmm. There's so many aspects in it that are true but shouldn't be true. And then there's like kind of this shade thrown towards travel agencies for poaching nurses away from the bedside. And what's interesting about that is you're not away from the bedside. You're just away from a hospital organization owning you at the bedside. Mm-hmm. You're still at the bedside, which is different than a lot of... early retirements, career shifts that traded the emergency room for less stressful nursing jobs at schools, summer camps, and private doctor's offices. I have seen this a ton. I just saw a girl on my Facebook yesterday that I used to work with in one of the ERs around here, and she's a school nurse this year. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, look at her living her best life. She looks so happy. Mm-hmm. Happy.
And I've been at the bedside with a nurse who literally broke down and cried and was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm choosing an outpatient job.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I completely understand. This is tough. Like what we're going through mentally, physically. They talk about people at the bedside. They talk about us as a number wise, but what are they talking about us regarding our mental health?
Girl.
And how we're dealing with things day by day by day.
It's a tough job even if we were adequately staffed. And I think that's what's being missed. It's like, oh, nurses are in crisis or, there's a shortage or whatever. And it's like, oh, like the crisis only exists because there isn't enough of us. Like we witness the worst days of people's lives repeatedly over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And then you get on social media and it's politicized one way or the other. Mm-hmm. And it's not to me. It's just a life that, like, didn't make it. It's just that, like, even for the ones that we know are going to pass away. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can be there through, 3 layers of plastic holding a human hand. And sometimes you can't. And all of that is just like, where does it go? You said yesterday you were recently had a code.
Yeah. My last code.
Yeah.
And I feel like, what
happened?
So with this patient, very young person, younger than me, like 24, 25. And he ended up having a code. I could see the rhythm changes. I hit the code button, started CPR. And of course, the physician starts coming in, asking me all these questions as I'm like pounding on his chest. And by the end of the code, the patient kept coding, like I want to say every 15 minutes for about 2 hours. We ran this code. And by the end of it, I was mentally and physically drained to where when the mother of this patient came into his room and just screamed in grief, I was numb. Mm-hmm.
So we had to take a commercial break because that's how famous this podcast is. It has commercials. But we're back now. And you were right in the middle of a code story, and it was touching my heart. So, continue.
Okay.
Are you good?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember where you were in this story?
So after the code, the mother came back into his room, and she screamed like a mother. Like once you become a mother, it's like that like scream.
Only a mother could.
But I felt nothing, and that was the first time in my 5 years of being a nurse that I completely separated myself from the situation, and it bothered me so much to where when I went to sleep that night, I couldn't sleep and I had to come back to work the next day. But I tossed and I turned and I tossed and I turned. And I was just like, Lord, is this profession still for me?
Wow.
And in the midst of feeling numb when the mom had her scream was in the midst of the code. The doctor had said if he would have only gotten his seizure medication, he wouldn't have coded. And the way that he projected that comment was as if I wasn't doing anything. And that's the frustrating part because it's like, I've literally been in this patient's room since he got here. I've been hanging meds, I've been doing drips, I've been trying to cool him, I've been trying to care for him. I haven't even walked out of his room. And for you to make a comment like that, as if I haven't been treating this boy, what does that do to me as a nurse?
As a human.
That crushed my self-esteem. It crushed my knowledge as a nurse. It just crushed everything in me. And it hurt so bad that I even had to question myself. And when I came back the next morning, another patient coming through, sick, on the verge of coding again. And all I said was, Lord, not again. Because I just didn't know. I thought maybe the 8 hours of sleep that I tried to get in between a traumatic moment like that and coming back to work, hopefully I could forget about it, put it in the back of my mind. But now, again, I'm back at the bedside, having to treat somebody else, another family member. And it's like, you try to disregard what had happened before, even though this was somebody's life that is now gone. But the blame is something that still bothers me. And this has happened over a month ago.
Wow. But
even now, I'm just like second guessing some of the decisions that I make, making sure. And mind you, the medication that the doctor was talking about, he had just put it in.
Right.
And I'm like, you see, I've been doing this, I've been doing that. They don't want to hear that.
No.
The question is, why didn't you give it to him?
Right.
And that's the frustrating part. And we talk about burnout, but when you are constantly, not saying all doctors do this, but when you are constantly, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, how are you supposed to feel?
Yeah.
But after the end of that code, it really changed my light in a different way to nursing, to bedside.
Right.
And now, a month later, it just doesn't feel the same. And it's sad, but I'm trying to figure out ways of how I can get that spark back.
Do you feel defeated in a way?
I do. I can't. And I didn't know how to put that into words, but yeah, I think defeat is it. Because you try so hard, you're thinking you're doing the best for your patient, and then something still happens.
Yeah. I think that's very common in NCCU. It's an exhaustive environment. It's where the sickest of the sick patients go. It's where every option under the sun is exhausted, and yet our outcomes are still more death than life. And to have a team member sort of pin that one on you, sort of make a remark that made you feel like you had to carry it. I can't imagine, that is just, it's like life sucking, it's soul sucking, because there you are in the room and there we've been in the room for you've been a nurse 5 years. It wasn't long before you got into CCU, which congratulations. It's not easy to do, guys. Only the best of the best do that, just saying. And I've worked with you. I know your work ethic. I know you all but climb up into the bed with the patient. I'm sorry.
And it's hard because it's almost like, well, where do I go from here?
Right.
What they say, oh, get counseling, get this, get that. But then they want you back at that bedside the next day to do it all over again. So it's like, in the meantime, and we talk about, again, leaving that where you're supposed to feel important to this company, or you're supposed to feel like they care about
fulfilled in your purpose, working at, like, we all went into this because we felt like it was our purpose. We felt we borderline. I mean, for a lot of nurses, it's very much in conjunction with our faith. It's very much in conjunction with our identity as people. Like, I believe and feel like I was born to be a nurse. Like, I was born to bring hope to the hopeless. I was born to, like, comfort those who mourn. I was born to bring life where there's death. And like, I feel that. And I think a lot of nurses do. And I think the healthcare industry knows that. It's an easy point of exploitation. But yeah.
Yeah. So that was a tough moment. And it's, again, when you start to feel empty in that way, you start to feel empty in other aspects of your life. Because now that you feel empty at work, it's like, how can I fulfill with my child or with this part or with that part? And it does something to your mood. It does something to your overall persona sometimes.
Well, it's trauma. It's trauma that's multifaceted. It's your own personal trauma of the interaction that you had with the physician, the feelings that you had to take on of this being your responsibility. It's the trauma of hearing a mom lose her child. It's the trauma of giving your all and the outcome not being what you hoped for. It's the trauma repeatedly over and over and over again of witnessing people and families and lives on the worst day of their life. It is impossible to think that we could compartmentalize that and leave that in a nice little tidy bucket of at work and it not come into our everyday life.
Yeah. And the hard part is for me, when I really think about, do I want to do anything else? Could I see myself going to
Lowe's,
med-surg nursing or any other kind of nursing? I'm like, I felt like I've always wanted to be a critical care nurse because that's how I know, like, I'm really, really helping you. And it's not saying like the other units aren't, but it was just like life or death. Like, I really felt like this is my moment. This is where I'm supposed to be. And now that I'm feeling like, and occasionally, it's occasional feelings, but more often than not, now I'm like, could I see myself doing anything else? And right now, I'm still like teeter-tottering with it, but I still love the critical care aspect of it. I still love helping the ones where it's literally life or death.
Yeah.
And then the autonomy of that level of nursing. I just wish there was more respect with it.
Yeah. Respect and I think a capability to be able to do my job well. I do my job well when I'm on a 1-to-1 patient ratio like I'm supposed to in critical care. You know, I do my job best when the conditions that I'm working in are safe for me to be able to be 100% tapped in and focused on this patient right here in front of me, because that's what critical care patients require, true critical care patients.
Yes.
I dare say, oh my gosh, my whole thing's going to be shut down. Some patients could require a 2-to-1 ratio, like a 2-nurse to one patient ratio. I mean, you've got CRRT going and
blood products,
ECMO, and all this other stuff. Like the stuff that you can get into in critical care requires more than just one person. And yet it's like, oh, we're really short-staffed. Here's 3. Why didn't you hang the Keppra 30 seconds after I ordered it? Now this patient's coding. Like, are you kidding me? Like, not only is it disrespectful, it's disingenuous, and it's impossible. It's impossible to be everything that 1 or 2 critical care patients need at the same time. And, well, why don't you ask for help? Because the next nurse beside me is in the exact same predicament.
Exactly. They're drowning too. And just that 2 seconds, oh, can you help me move, or can you help me hang this medication? They may not have it because their patients are going down too. And that happened to me literally 2 days ago, of where all us seasoned nurses got tripled. I had 2 MRIs I had to go to with 2 patients.
This podcast is called For the Caregiver, so we're just under the assumption that y'all know how difficult of a feat that is. But if you happen to be a person that isn't a healthcare worker inside of a hospital, taking a critical care patient to MRI is a 3-hour ordeal, at least. So an MRI at baseline is a huge magnet. So you have to get most of the machines in the hospital, everything in a hospital is metal. So you have to switch the patient over from their 16 drips, literally 16 drips, onto IV pumps that are compatible with an MRI. You have to put them on a bed that's compatible with an MRI machine. You have to put them on a ventilator that's compatible with an MRI machine. You have to go with respiratory therapy with that patient who cannot have anything on their person. You cannot have anything on your person that is incompatible with an MRI. Like, it is a big ordeal. And you also run the risk. I mean, this is a critically ill patient. Like, you're constantly teetering on life and death. And then they're just in that machine by themselves. And you're outside, like, looking in the glass. Yes. Their monitor has to be MRI compatible. Like, it's an ordeal. To have 3 patients and then have 2 that go to MRI, that's half your shift right there. That's half your shift.
Frequent neural checks.
Right.
One was every hour neural checks. And the issue is, like, are you looking at the acuity of these patients? No, we're short-staffed. So you know what? You pick up these 3.
But I bought pizza for the unit. It's fine. And I gave you a T-shirt that says Healthcare Heroes. So you're a hero.
Right?
There's nothing a hero can't do. Even the rhetoric surrounding that, huge signs out in front of the hospital, Healthcare Heroes work here, was such a psychological ploy to keep me going to work 5 shifts out of the week.
Because you're a hero.
I'm a hero.
Don't you see that cape behind you? You can do it.
You got this. You got this. I'm going to make a $3 million bonus in the middle of a global pandemic and give you a T-shirt that says you're a hero.
Donuts and food.
Come on.
Every day. Keep going. You may not get that lunch break, but here's a donut.
Heroes don't eat. And if they do, it's trash food that I've provided for you.
And is it sad? Sorry to cut you off.
No.
But just the fact of sometimes we feel so guilty to even take a break.
Yeah.
I've been so many times where
that's so true.
I'm in the point of my patient needs this medication, that medication. I got to do this, that I'm on the point of almost passing out before I finally take a break.
Right. That's safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely.
You know, but it's true. And it's like I'm not at my patients aren't at a place where I deserve to eat lunch yet. Or my charting's not at a place where I'll get out of here by 8:30, 9 o'clock tonight. So I just need to do that. Because heaven forbid that somebody look at the chart and the I's and O's aren't like totally up to date.
Right.
Which it makes sense. In critical care medicine, yeah, I do want to know how that LASIK from 2 hours ago did to now. Like, and I could do that if I wasn't tripled. So all of these concepts and ideas that go into the rigidity of taking care of a critical care patient, into the literal moment by moment, like 5-minute blood pressure cycling. How do I adjust this drip? How do I do this? All of that has its place, but it's impossible to do on 3 people. So you have all of these standards up here and I'm not saying lower the standards. I think the standards are appropriate. I think a critical care patient is at this sick level of standard, like should be there. But then you've given me a scenario where I cannot accomplish or reach those standards for any of my patients. And so now I prioritize. So now I'm like looking at the 3 and I'm like, okay, this is probably the most important thing for this person. This is the most important thing for this person. This is the most important. And you go from there. And then you're awake at 3 o'clock in the morning like, did I do my best? Are they going to be okay? I literally call. I don't know if you've been there on night shift on one of the times I've called. And I'm like, how is so-and-so doing? Did they get their blah, blah, blah? You know, because I'm like so invested at this. And you do get invested in critical care. It's very different from the ER. But not saying we don't care in the ER. I love ER. ER is my first love. It's my passion. But you get so wrapped up and you take on like a responsibility that is and isn't yours, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know.
And then when you're just asking for that responsibility and that accountability and everything that wraps into one for you to be paid that
congruently. Congruently. But honestly, there's no amount of pay that makes it okay to have me tripled. You know what I mean? Like, there's no amount of pay that if the end result is these patients aren't being able to be cared for at this standard. There's no amount of pay that makes the like you're getting paid right now. You know, you're a travel nurse. But it doesn't make the fact that you're like, wow, I just experienced my first code where I had zero feelings. There's no amount that can compensate for like your loss of humanity in that moment that you felt within yourself. And so, yes, pay us appropriately. And if you did, it would fix the issue of nurses being willing to be at the bedside. And then you wouldn't have to have me tripled.
Agreed.
What a concept.
Agreed.
What a concept. Because, like, when you're valued for what you're actually worth, you're willing to show up. And I think that's what we're going to see. Like, that's what healthcare as an industry is. I think that's the direction that it's going in. It's like, hey, I'm valuable.
Yes.
I'm valuable. And where we have been disregarded as, like, you're just as easy to fill with a new grad that I can pay half half the salary with. It's like, no, we're in a situation where not so easy to fill anymore. Not so easy to fill anymore. And I think that, what was she saying on here? You're going to have to edit this part, June. Sorry. Ooh. Okay. I'm just going to, so there's a Nurse Abnormalities is a site that I follow on Instagram. And she's talking about the New York Times article as well. And her last paragraph is just awesome. So I'm going to read it. Several times throughout the article, travel agencies are villainized for paying nurses high wages during the pandemic and stating that nurses were poached from hospitals to travel. Newsflash. If hospitals had invested in their nurse retention in the first place with basics like fair wages, benefits, maternity leave, and vacation time, safe staffing, bathrooms and lunch breaks, and proper PPE, maybe everyone wouldn't want to leave to travel. And I think that's the crux of it, because it's easy for an article like this in the New York Times to say multiple times, it was like, nurses are fed up with people that aren't getting vaccinated. That may be a component of it. Nurses are fed up with people who aren't wearing masks. That could be a component of it too. Nurses are fed up because the pandemic has whatever. The crux of the issue is this has been a long time coming for nurses. And had the healthcare industry invested into their nurses and actually valued them at you can't run a hospital without nurses. You can't.
Exactly.
You can run a hospital with a lot of other people missing, as we see every weekend. We were talking about that when I drive in and the employee parking lot Monday through Friday is packed out. And then filled, and then on Saturday and Sunday, it's like a quarter of those cars, and the whole place still fucking runs because nurses show up for their shifts and run the bitch. Like, I'm not saying administration doesn't have its place and, all of that, but what I'm saying is you can't run it without us. There's nobody that can do what we do. And so if you started valuing us like there's nobody that can do what we do, you wouldn't have run into this global pandemic in the backdrop of that culture within healthcare. And it's just like, what do we do? I don't know. Like, that's the whole reason I started this podcast, is like, just to say, you're not alone in how you feel about this. You're not alone in coming away from the bedside every night and feeling hopeless and feeling helpless and feeling like you didn't measure up. You were in a situation where you could have never measured up in the first place. Mm. And that is not on you. And the fact that you still get up and keep going, I don't know. It's either to our detriment, or if we stopped, it would be to theirs.
And I think that's it, though. It's just knowing that we're not alone. Because a lot of the times we may suffer in silence, or, you know, just going off of like being a new grad, you don't know. You're thinking this is how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to feel this way or be this way. So we don't say anything. Mm-hmm. And then we keep going and we keep going. And then just having somebody to talk to who's in the same, I don't want to say predicament, but same like environment, to be like, no, this isn't okay. And I feel like with this pandemic, again, we're putting highlight to it to where it's going to allow more people to speak out.
Right.
And to realize, hey, like, you're paying this person, that person, this amount, and you're paying me chump change.
Right.
And it's having us to think more and to think outside the box, to be like, no, I'm worth more.
Right.
So I'm going to leave because you can't run a hospital without me. And you, even though you're using threats, like how Texas now is trying to revoke your license. If you're trying
if you leave the bedside, if you leave a hospital and you go to a travel agency, Texas has made moves to have your license revoked, which is insane to me. It's like saying, I will shoot myself in the foot if you leave the bedside. Because why are you revoking license in the middle of a nursing shortage?
And then wonder why we're short.
Like, huh?
So then again, it goes back to that
because
question.
I want to be a nurse so bad right now. like, I just don't understand that. But I think what I was trying to say, I just remembered what I was trying to say originally about the article being like, oh, it's because nurses are frustrated at the general public. No, don't politicize us. Don't politicize us. Don't make it an us versus society issue. There may be an aspect of that, and I certainly can, I certainly can feel that as well. But the nursing shortage crisis was an issue before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. The pandemic just came along and blew it up and highlighted it. Mm-hmm. And healthcare industry was quick to pimp us out to the front line. Without proper PPE, without adequate staffing ratios. We don't turn anybody away. We don't turn anybody away. I remember our hospital was 100%. There was a shift where every single person in that hospital was COVID positive. I remember feeling like I couldn't even walk the hallway and breathe. Like, and of course, you're in whatever all day long, but like, I think I'm trying to get to the fact that healthcare has made a ton of money off of sick people and pimping out people who are full of empathy, full of compassion, full of healing to the front lines of those sick people. And anything that goes wrong in the tenor of that exchange can be put back on me. Mm-hmm. It's this continuous dance of liability and saving face. Well, I go home and I can't sleep at night. Well, I go home and I can't give 100% to my family because I'm not sure if I followed every protocol correctly. I'm not sure I am not sure if 110% was enough. I don't know. And what I'd love to get to in this podcast and in this whole entire project of For the Caregiver is when we start releasing this stuff and people healthcare workers posting comments and their experiences, and I would love to get to solutions. Because at the end of the day,
oh, sorry. Are we
filming?
Oh, dang! My bad. May have to edit that part out.
Probably won't. We probably won't. I love it. For those of you that are just listening and not watching on YouTube, Ayesha just stood up and picked her wedgie. It's fine. It's totally fine.
You want that?
Yeah, she don't care. We're nurses. Listen.
I know.
We are
I'm
nurses.
like, I've seen so many butts and all that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm never not going to be a nurse. I go to Lowe's and I always imagine working there. It looks magical to me, especially the like decorations part, like during the holidays.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, I could run this bitch. Like, I want to work here, but I'm never not going to be a nurse. Mm-hmm. It's what I was made for. So how do we take what belonged to us in the first place? Our profession. Our profession. And we got into this a little bit on the first episode with Umu, and we talked about how certain concepts of nursing, even the 12-hour shift, is so archaic. And it goes way back to the early 1900s when nursing started, when nursing as an industry started, when healthcare as an industry started, and they were recruiting nurses. Those women weren't married and didn't have children and didn't have families. And that's how the 12-hour shift was about. Like, nursing was your calling. It was almost synonymous with, like, being a nun. That's why a lot of nuns were nurses as well. And so it was like, this is what you were doing all day, every day with your time. And so fast forward to 2021, and you're still getting a 3-month maternity leave. And you're still working 12-hour shifts, even though there's numerous research done on the fact that most medical errors that are caused by nurses happen after hour 8 and 9. You know, and you're just going like, what is going on here? This is my profession. Like, I'm sorry. You don't sit in an office and love nursing more than I do. You don't.
Documenting the numbers, not holding
Clicking
the hands, not having those personal interactions.
Right.
We do that.
We do that. We do this. We run this. How do we run this? How do we get to the point where we run this? And what happens is, and we touched on this in episode 1 too, what happens is, I'm passionate about this, right? So I work my way up in management, right? But then I'm brainwashed in a healthcare system that doesn't actually care. And so I get to the point where, okay, now I'm the CNO. But I'm in a system where I can't. I have no, it's like.
You want to try to make a difference.
Be the change.
You come.
Right.
You initially, from the bottom, say, I want to be that change. Right. And then as you continue to grow or you continue to go up that ladder, then it's like, no, you can't be that change. This is how it's going to be. And this is how you're going to think.
Or you're going to be kicked out. You're going to comply with, because nurses aren't who own healthcare. That's a whole other thing. That's a healthcare administration is a completely separate, like college course box from healthcare on the boots on the ground. And so there's this huge, yes, I get that it's a business model. Yes, I get that, like, stuff has to be balanced. We have to make money in order to keep, I get all of that. But there's so much excess financially in healthcare that, and I mean, you can get into pharmaceuticals, you can get into food, you can get into all of it, and it's all relevant and it all runs together. But I think in the sense of what we do in the hospital setting, what we do in acute care, how do we get into ownership of this? I don't know. That's what I want. That's what I want people to chime in with, and really, us as a profession, become passionate about.
That's the thing. Remembering the compassion. Even in those higher states. Because once you get to see CEOs and everything,
CNOs.
see all of that,
Yeah.
everybody below you becomes a number.
Right.
So the compassion is taken away. Again, being by the bedside, dealing with the family, hearing the mother cry, like all of that, you become blind to it. So now you can officially run your numbers. So somehow, some way, we have to get the compassion back of actually caring about people. Because once you get up there, I'm not saying everybody's like that, but how this healthcare is running, it's a business. So with the business, we're not entwining the emotion apart.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like something between being efficient and running a business, which is necessary, and having what we need at the bedside to save lives. Somewhere it's not connecting. There is a massive disconnect. And what I'm afraid is happening and may need to happen is that this down here is going to literally implode completely before this up here realizes that
we really need to make a change.
We need to make changes. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, when are we going to get to that when so many people have died? Not even beyond.
There's just casualties. There's just losses
casualties.
In the meantime.
Like,
you just needed dialysis in the meantime, and your heart stopped. Like, you just needed like there really and truly are so many casualties caught in the midst of this fallout, and I'm just going like, where's the end? Like, where
do they have a certain number in mind? Like,
it's sort of like the stoplights. Like, when there's like, once a certain intersection reaches like 40-something car accidents, then they're like, okay, this intersection, literally that's how roadways work. Like, once there's a problematic intersection for a long enough period of time that there's been X amount of car accidents at that intersection, then that's when you can motion to the city or the county or whatever to put a stoplight.
Wow.
Legitimately. Like, that's how that works. And I feel like, where is that end? Like, what is that number in healthcare? And, like, what would that even look like? Like, what does it even look like? I don't know. I want people to comment. I want people to ask for certain topics to be talked about. I want people to come in with their ideas. Because I never started this like, here's the problem and I have the answer. I just started this like, here's the problem, let's come up with some solutions. I don't know that we'll ever have the answer, but
something has to change.
Something has to change.
Something has to change.
Something has to change.
If not, we will continue to be in this cycle. And then what happens when you don't have any more nurses? Then what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Because I felt like they're getting us to that point.
Especially in this era where, like, you see a lot of nurses on Instagram making money with their content, and they should go live your best life. We're highly educated, smart people, and especially if we've had any experience under our belt, like, if I can have a better life and make more money running a nursing Instagram page than coming home with secondary trauma every day from the hospital, what do you think I'm going to do? Of course.
Right?
And a lot of nurses are leaving the bedside for nurse practitioner, going up to that next, level of care, which I'm starting to see is just a higher level of, if you stay in the hospital setting, it's just a higher paid level of the same kind of BS, yeah. But yeah.
But then also, well, I don't personally know because I'm not in a nurse practitioner, but I appreciate the nurse practitioner because they give a different aspect because they've been by the bedside.
And it's a more holistic approach, I think, mindset to the patient themselves, but also to the way they know that the way that what they're ordering is going to happen and be carried out within the acute care setting. And so it's like, it's just a more well-rounded approach, I feel. Not to diminish physicians. I love physicians. Not at all. I just don't know what it's like to be you because I'm not.
Right.
So, yeah. So do we want to end now, June? How long are we at?
An hour and 8 minutes.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Were you going somewhere with the nurse practice? Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was going to talk about maternity leave, but we can end if you want to.
Do you want to talk about maternity leave?
You can. I don't think it applies. So
Or yeah, I don't know if it would it be
It
apply
could be extra content for what we say for.
Okay.
For a different show.
It's up to you.
So
To you.
No, it's fine. Well, let's talk about
Since I know we're talking mainly about different subject, not different, but
yeah. I think pay is just one aspect of where we've undervalued nurses, and I think that maternity leave is another aspect, and that's again going back to that archaic thought process of like, this was your calling, this was your purpose, and now you have all these nurses that also have families. And I'm doing CPR, and my milk is literally letting down, and it's leaking through my scrubs, and I'm going like, I shouldn't even be here. Like, I shouldn't even be here. So talk about your experience with maternity leave and nursing, especially being a single mom.
yeah. And my whole pregnancy, I just remember I have to work. Because I'm going to be using my own PTO for this maternity leave.
What? It's like the Bernie Sanders meme. I am here once again. Once again, using my own PTO.
Using my own PTO.
Right.
And I knew that if I was sick, if I wasn't feeling well, all I could think of is I want to spend time with my baby when she gets here. Yeah. So I literally worked even when the doctors had told me, hey, you're like 4 centimeters dilated. You need to chill out for this last week. I was like, I can't.
No way, because any time beforehand is less time after.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have to work. And I literally worked up until I gave birth. Like literally my last day was the day before or the day after. But I just remembering having contractions and being like, no, I need one more day.
So many nurses will tell you that. So many nurses will tell you I worked up until the day of my labor.
And the sad part about it, again, is just having the mental fact of I need this maternity leave. I need these hours to have maternity leave with my child. Yeah. And then after my hours are gone, I got to come back to work. And I'm breastfeeding and like you mentioned, doing CPR or even patient care and your milk is
coming in.
And you're having the pain, but you're just, in another aspect, I have this drug to give. I have this patient care to give. I can't leave the bedside right now. And even when you attempt to, I've gotten, you have to leave now for 15 minutes to pump? Yeah, I do.
Right.
But again, as a new ICU nurse, I felt almost bullied or in the mindset of, no, I'm not supposed to think this way. I need to take care of them. My milk dries up, it dries up.
Yeah.
But I have to take care of them.
Yeah. Both of my babies got 6 months of milk. And I think that was largely because of my profession. Because I just could not get away. I remember after Esther was born was when I was going into ICU for the first time. So I came off of that maternity leave and I immediately started orientation in ICU. And they didn't even have a place for me to pump.
Wow.
There was no room to go to. Or if there was, you could go down to... So you could go from the 3rd floor down to labor and delivery, and then your whole 15 minutes is gone. Like, it takes me like 7 minutes to get there and back, you know? It's like, what? So I just remember thinking like, I shouldn't be here. Like, I shouldn't be here. And I remember when my first daughter was born, after she was born, I just kept thinking, I have 3 months to get her to a place where she doesn't need me.
Wow.
Like, I have 3 months to get her to a place where she could rely on someone else in a bottle. Like, that was, like, my whole goal. Forget, like, just doting, loving, bonding, you know, all of that. I was just like, wow. I have 3 months to make sure she's okay without me for 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was my mindset. And I remember I went into my second, pregnancy, and I was like, I will not have that mindset. But we shouldn't have that mindset in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we shouldn't have to choose between our profession where we're giving our all and our families who also need our all. My family shouldn't go through secondary trauma because of my job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's it for breast care. Breastfeeding. That's it for, what am I even saying? That is it for maternity leave. That's it. What are you thinking? Why are you giving me that face?
No,
Junior's so salty today.
No.
Junior's telling me I have to wrap it up. Just kidding.
This talk was amazing. Like, I really appreciate you having me come on the show, because it's just like this podcast, because a lot of stuff that I was thinking, or a lot of stuff that I was dealing internally, just to be able to express it, I'm like, whew, what a weight off my shoulder. So I couldn't imagine like how many other people are thinking the same way, and just having a safe place just to express it. Yay. It just really...
You hear that, June?
Appreciate it.
We're doing it. Ayesha, thank you so much. Like, seriously, thank you for coming. Thank you for, I texted you, yesterday? And she showed up today. Thank you for coming. Thank you for bringing your heart, your stories, your vulnerability, your experiences. It's priceless.
Yes.
It is.
Welcome.
It is priceless. Can't put a price on that. Anyways, as always, you're not alone. We love you. Peace out. And that's it. And that's it.
And that's it.
And that's motherfucking it. You can put that in there.